The morning air hung crisp and cold over Fort Benning. Dawn had barely broken, casting long shadows across the Advanced Marksmanship Training Center. This hallowed ground had forged America's deadliest warriors since 1918, producing generations of snipers who turned combat shooting into lethal art. A place where a single bullet precisely placed could alter the course of battles half a world away. Master Sergeant James Wilson stood motionless on the firing range. At 52, his weathered face bore the unmistakable marks of a career spent in harsh deserts and unforgiving mountains. 6 tours in Afghanistan had left permanent creases around his eyes, each line a testament to missions that official records would never acknowledge. His broad shoulders remained square despite the weight they'd carried, the weight of decisions, the weight of lives taken and saved. Wilson watched as the new class of sniper candidates filed onto the range. 24 recruits, mostly combat veterans, stood at rigid attention. Each had survived brutal selection to reach this point. The morning light caught the polished barrels of their M24 sniper weapon systems. The Remington 700 actions nestled in Macmillan stocks topped with loopholed Mark IV scopes, the finest precision instruments the U.S. military could provide. Tools of a trade measured in minute fractions and millimeters of accuracy. These rifles, Wilson began his voice carrying across the silent range, are merely tools. The weapon system that matters most is between your ears. His steel-gray eyes scanned the line of recruits assessing measuring. Half of you won't graduate, not because you can't shoot, but because you can't think. The candid eyes stood motionless, eyes forward, all except one. In the far corner of the line stood a woman smaller than the others, Alexandra Morgan, 28 years old according to her file, though her eyes suggested otherwise. Eyes that had seen too much. Wilson had questioned her assignment to his class. Female snipers were no longer unusual in the Army, but something about Morgan didn't fit. Her service record showed 3 years as an intelligence analyst. No combat deployments, no special operations experience. Yet here she stood, transferred into the Army's most elite sniper course through channels that required a general's signature. Today we evaluate your baseline. 1 shot, 1 kill, elementary distance 300 yards, Wilson announced. Bishop, you're first. Staff Sergeant Michael Bishop stepped forward with unmistakable confidence. 6'2" former Army Ranger with multiple combat deployments, his chest full of ribbons, including a Silver Star from Afghanistan. He moved to the firing position with practiced ease. Watch and learn, little lady, Bishop whispered as he passed Morgan. This is what real shooters look like. Morgan said nothing. Her face remained expressionless, eyes focused downrange. Bishop settled behind his rifle, made his adjustments with practiced precision, and fired. The report echoed across the range. Through the spotting scope, Wilson observed the hit center mass on the human-shaped target. Good shot, Bishop, Wilson acknowledged. Just right of center. Bishop rose with a satisfied smirk, nodding toward Morgan, as if to say, your turn to embarrass yourself. One by one, the candidates took their positions. Most hit the target zone. A few delivered impressive shots. Wilson recorded each performance with the clinical detachment of a man who had spent decades evaluating killers. Morgan, Wilson finally called, you're up. She moved forward silently. Her BDUs hung slightly loose on her slender frame. No swagger, no unnecessary movement, just the quiet economy of motion that Wilson recognized from men who had spent years operating in environments where excess movement meant detection. Death. Morgan took position behind the rifle. She made no immediate adjustments to the scope. Instead, she simply laid her cheek against the stock and breathed, slow measured breaths. Think that tiny frame of yours can even handle the recoil, Bishop called out from the sideline, drawing chuckles from several recruits. Wilson shot them a silencing glare. Focus on your own deficiencies, Bishop. Morgan remained still, seemingly oblivious to the mockery. Her fingers lightly traced the barrel of the M24 as if becoming acquainted with an old friend. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet that Wilson had to lean forward to hear. I'd like to observe today, if permitted. The request caught Wilson off guard. Observe, this is a qualification exercise, not a demonstration. Morgan's eyes finally met his. I understand, Sergeant. I'd prefer to study wind conditions and timing patterns before firing. Bishop's laugh erupted behind them. Scared to pull the trigger. Why'd you even sign up? Morgan didn't turn to acknowledge him. Instead, she addressed Wilson directly, her voice soft but firm. "I've fired before. I won't do it again unless I'm sure I should." Something in her tone silenced even Bishop. The simple statement carried weight far beyond its words. Wilson studied her face, looking for fear or uncertainty. He found neither. Instead, he saw something unexpected. Restraint. Discipline beyond what most soldiers twice her age possessed. "Everyone fires today, Morgan. That's the standing order," Wilson finally said. Morgan nodded once, then turned back to the rifle. Her movements became methodical. She checked the wind flags, observed the slight mirage through the scope, and made minute adjustments to her position. Her breathing slowed further. For a brief moment, as Morgan's finger curled around the trigger, Wilson noticed something else. A partial tattoo visible on her wrist where her sleeve had pulled back slightly. Dark ink curving like some kind of serpent. The rifle cracked. Through the spotting scope, Wilson confirmed the hit. Dead center, not just center mass, perfect center, the kind of shot that would punch through the exact middle of a playing card at 300 yards. Morgan rose silently, her face showing neither pride nor relief. She simply nodded to Wilson and moved to return to the line. "Wait," Wilson commanded. "Make your rifle safe and report to my office in 15 minutes." The range fell silent as Morgan cleared her weapon and walked away. Colonel Raymond Carter leaned forward in the leather chair, squinting at the file open on his desk. At 63, his once powerful frame had thickened around the middle, but he maintained the unmistakable bearing of a career special operations officer. The office walls surrounding him displayed the physical artifacts of an extraordinary military career. Shadow boxes containing medals and unit insignia, photographs with generals and presidents, mementos from missions across 4 continents. These were the visible reminders. The most significant operations remained locked in classified archives, or existed only in the memories of the men who had executed them. Operations that had changed the course of conflicts without ever appearing in official military histories. Carter had commanded Delta Force during its most active period following the September 11th attacks. Under his leadership, America's premier counterterrorism unit had hunted high-value targets across Iraq and Afghanistan, executing missions deemed impossible by conventional military standards. Now nearing retirement, he served as special advisor to the commanding general at Fort Benning. A knock on the door interrupted his review of the file. "Enter," Carter called. Master Sergeant Wilson stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You wanted to see me about the new sniper class, sir." Carter nodded, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "James, how long have we known each other?" Wilson settled into the chair. "Since Operation Anaconda in '02, sir, 20 years now. And in those 20 years, have I ever interfered with your training programs?" "No, sir, never." Carter closed the file folder. "I'm about to. There's a trainee in your new class, Alexandra Morgan." Wilson's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, sir. She qualified this morning. Unusual case. Her placement came through channels I don't typically see for standard students. I was going to look further into her background." "Don't," Carter said flatly. "Her assignment came directly from the Pentagon. That's all you need to know." Wilson leaned forward, his forearms resting on his knees. "With all due respect, Colonel, she's in my class. I need to know if she's qualified to be there. Her service record shows no combat deployments, no special operations experience. Just 3 years as an intelligence analyst." Carter's fingers tapped rhythmically on the desk. For a long moment, he seemed to weigh his next words carefully. "James, there are some personnel whose real service records don't exist in the system you have access to. Morgan is one of them." He paused, choosing his words with deliberate care. "I need you to accept that there are aspects of her background that remain classified even from you." Wilson's jaw tightened. "Sir, I've got 23 other trainees who've earned their spots. They're combat veterans with proven skills. They deserve instructors who know their capabilities. If Morgan has some secret qualification—" "She does," Carter interrupted, "far beyond what you might imagine." He hesitated again, then made a decision. "I shouldn't tell you this, but I trust your discretion. After today's qualification, did you notice anything unusual about Morgan? Any distinctive markings?" Wilson's brow furrowed momentarily before understanding dawned. "A tattoo. On her wrist. I only caught a glimpse." What did it look like? Some kind of snake, I think. Couldn't see the whole design. Carter nodded slowly. A black snake coiled around a bullet. Wilson's eyes widened. How did you know that? Because I've seen it before. Carter opened a drawer and removed a small leather case. From it, he extracted a weathered photograph and slid it across the desk. The image showed a younger Carter in combat fatigues, his arm in a makeshift sling. Behind him stood four figures, their faces deliberately blurred. On the forearm of one, the same tattoo was clearly visible. Kandahar Province 2012. I was commanding a Delta reconnaissance element. Operation went sideways. Taliban fighters had us pinned down for 18 hours. No extraction possible. Carter's voice took on a distant quality. We were outnumbered 15 to 1. 4 operators with limited ammunition against 60-plus enemy combatants. We should have died there. Wilson studied the photograph. But you didn't. No, because someone was watching over us. Carter tapped the blurred figure with the tattoo. Black Viper, a specialized unit that officially never existed. 12 operators with one specialty, long-range precision elimination of high-value targets in denied areas. The best snipers ever fielded by any military force in history. Wilson handed the photograph back. I've never heard of them. You weren't meant to. Black Viper operated completely off the books, directly under CIA Special Activities Division. They weren't deployed unless absolutely necessary, when conventional special operations forces couldn't complete the mission. And Morgan was one of them. Wilson asked, skepticism evident in his voice. Look at her shooting stance sometime, Carter replied. Watch how she handles a weapon. The precision, the economy of movement. Those aren't skills you learn in basic marksmanship. Wilson leaned back in his chair, processing this revelation. Why is she in my class if she's already an elite sniper? Carter's expression darkened. That's where this gets complicated. 3 years ago, Black Viper was deployed to Mosul for Operation Blackstone. Intelligence indicated a high-level ISIS commander was planning a major attack on U.S. forces. The mission parameters required 12 snipers positioned across the city to simultaneously eliminate the target and his security detail. What happened? The intelligence was wrong. It was an ambush. Someone had compromised the operation. Carter's voice grew heavy. 11 members of Black Viper were killed. The 12th disappeared. Wilson's eyes widened with understanding. Morgan. Carter nodded. For 3 years, she's been officially listed as an intelligence analyst. Low profile, no combat duties. Until last month when she voluntarily requested transfer to your sniper school. Why, if she's already qualified beyond anything I could teach, that's what I need you to find out, Carter interrupted. Something's happening, James. I don't know what yet, but Morgan resurfacing now isn't coincidence. I need you to keep her in your program, observe her. Report directly to me. Wilson stood, his face set in grim determination. Yes, sir. Anything specific I should look for? Carter rose as well, his voice dropping to near whisper. If she's here, she has a reason. After Mosul, the remaining members of Black Viper were supposed to be hunted down and eliminated to maintain operational security. Someone very powerful wanted all traces of the unit erased. And you think she's in danger? Or we are, Carter replied grimly. Either way, we need to know why the last Black Viper has come out of hiding. Alexandra Morgan stood alone on the empty firing range. The Georgia sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and crimson, casting long shadows across the silent field. The day's training had concluded hours ago. The other trainees had departed for the barracks, their voices and laughter fading into the gathering dusk. But Morgan remained, silent, watchful. Her slender fingers traced the outline of the tattoo on her wrist, a Black Viper coiled around a bullet, the number 12 barely visible beneath the serpent's head. A reminder of those who no longer stood beside her. For 3 years she had buried the woman she once was. 3 years of hiding in plain sight. 3 years of waiting, watching, remembering. The weight of their absence pressed against her chest like a physical burden. 12 had entered Mosul that night. 11 never returned. Names that history would never record. Faces known only to those who had fought beside them. Heroes without graves or memorials. Morgan moved to the firing position she had occupied that morning. The range was empty now, the target still. She knelt beside the spot, her fingers brushing against the earth as if connecting with something beyond the physical world. I remember why I stopped, she whispered to the empty range. Words meant not for the living, but for ghosts only she could see. And I remember why I must begin again. Her thoughts drifted back to that morning. The perfect shot she had delivered. It had felt both foreign and familiar, like returning to a childhood home after decades away. The rifle an extension of her body. The target merely a mathematical equation to be solved through breath, bone, and bullet. She had shown restraint today, demonstrated only a fraction of her capability. The shot had been elementary for someone who had once placed a round through a vehicle's engine block at 1,800 meters in a 30-knot crosswind. Morgan heard footsteps approaching from behind. Heavy, deliberate, male, military gait. She didn't turn. Range is closed, trainee, Master Sergeant Wilson's voice carried across the twilight. Yes, Sergeant, she replied, rising to her feet with fluid grace. I was just leaving. Wilson approached, stopping several paces away, his silhouette dark against the fading light. Most candidates are celebrating their first day's qualification or studying tonight's reading assignment. Morgan turned to face him. I prefer the quiet, Sergeant. Wilson studied her with the intensity of a man who had spent decades evaluating warriors. You know, Morgan, I've been training the snipers for 15 years. Seen all types come through this course. Former Special Forces infantry, military, police. Even had a cook once who turned out to be one of the finest shooters I ever trained. He paused, gauging her reaction. Morgan's expression remained neutral. But I've never seen anyone handle a weapon the way you did today, Wilson continued. That wasn't a novice shot. I practiced, Sergeant. Bullshit. The word hung in the air between them. Not angry, just matter of fact. That was the shot of someone who's fired thousands of rounds under real-world conditions. Combat conditions. Morgan remained silent, her eyes never leaving his. Your file says you've never deployed. 3 years as an intelligence analyst. Yet you handle a rifle like someone who has hunted men, not paper targets. Wilson took another step closer. Colonel Carter seems to think you're special. Says I should just accept that and move on. The colonel is entitled to his opinion, Sergeant. Cut the crap, Morgan. What's your game? Why are you really here? Wilson's voice hardened. This isn't some qualification course for you to pad your resume. These men are training to deploy to put rounds on target when American lives depend on it. If you're just here to play games, I have never played games with lives, Sergeant. Morgan's voice remained soft, but carried an edge sharp enough to cut through Wilson's challenge. Not once in my career. Wilson's eyes narrowed. Then tell me why you're here. For a long moment, Morgan said nothing. The silence stretched between them, filled with unasked questions and unspoken truths. Everyone has ghosts, Sergeant Wilson, she finally said. I'm here to face mine. Before Wilson could respond, Morgan walked past him, heading toward the barracks, her footsteps silent even on the gravel path. Staff Sergeant Michael Bishop wasn't accustomed to being outshot, especially not by a woman half his size who hadn't even wanted to pull the trigger. He sat on his bunk field, stripping his M24 with practiced efficiency, each movement precise and methodical. Around him, other trainees prepared for the next day's training, their conversations a low murmur throughout the barracks. You're going to wear that bolt out if you clean it any harder, Rivera remarked from the adjacent bunk. The only other female in the class, Rivera had served 2 tours as a military police officer in Iraq before transferring to the sniper program. Bishop snorted. Just maintaining my equipment. Right. Nothing to do with Morgan outshooting everyone today. The mention of Morgan's name drew a scowl from Bishop. Lucky shot, Rivera laughed. That wasn't luck. That was skill. Bishop reassembled his rifle with sharp, angry movements. Skill from where her file says she's been pushing papers for 3 years. Intelligence analyst, my ass. Maybe she's naturally talented, Rivera suggested. Nobody's that natural, Bishop countered. You don't shoot like that without training, real training. He lowered his voice. Something's off about her. Did you see how she handled that rifle like she'd been born with it in her hands? And the way she moves silent like a fucking ghost. Rivera studied Bishop's face. You're actually worried about her? Not worried, curious. Bishop placed his cleaned rifle aside. Intel analysts don't move like that, don't shoot like that, don't have the 1,000-yard stare she's got. So what's your theory? Bishop leaned forward, lowering his voice further. When she was on the firing line, I saw something. A tattoo on her wrist when her sleeve pulled back. A tattoo half the army has tattoos, Bishop. Not like this. Bishop glanced around to ensure no one else was listening. Black snake wrapped around a bullet, and there was a number, 12, I think. Rivera shrugged. Sounds like typical military ink, probably from a previous unit. That's just it, Bishop insisted. I've served with guys from every special operations unit. Delta Rangers, Green Berets. Never seen that insignia before. So ask her about it tomorrow. Bishop's expression darkened. Oh, I intend to. One way or another, I'm going to find out who Alexandra Morgan really is. Outside the barracks window, a shadow shifted slightly, then disappeared into the darkness. Morgan moved silently away, having heard every word of their conversation. Her face remained expressionless, but her mind raced with calculations and contingencies. Bishop was observant, dangerous, the kind of man who wouldn't let questions go unanswered. She would need to be more careful. The dawn broke cold and clear over Fort Benning. Heavy dew clung to the grass, reflecting the first rays of sunlight. Morgan had been awake for hours, running silent laps around the perimeter of the training area. Not for physical conditioning, her body was already honed to peak efficiency, but for mental clarity. For 3 years, she had maintained a deliberate routine of anonymity. Now she was stepping back into the light. The risks were immense. She finished her run near the weapons maintenance building, a nondescript structure where the training rifles were stored and serviced. The armory wouldn't open for another hour. The perfect opportunity. Morgan moved to the rear entrance, her eyes scanning for security cameras or motion sensors. Finding none, she approached the door. The lock was standard military issue, child's play for someone trained in covert entry techniques. Within 30 seconds, she was inside. The room smelled of gun oil and solvent. Racks of M24 rifles lined the walls, each tagged with a trainee's name. Morgan moved directly to the rifle assigned to her, removing it from the rack with reverent care. She disassembled the weapon with practiced efficiency, examining each component under the beam of a small penlight. Her fingers moved across the barrel bolt trigger, assembly and scope mounts, feeling for imperfections invisible to the naked eye. The rifle was well maintained, but not to her standards. The scope's windage turret had 1/4 MOA of play, unacceptable for precision work beyond 600 meters. The trigger pull was slightly inconsistent. The bolt needed polishing to ensure smooth, silent operation. Morgan set to work using tools from a small kit concealed in her cargo pocket. Her movements were economical, precise, the kind of efficiency that came only from thousands of hours of repetition. She was so focused on her task that she almost missed the sound of the door opening. Almost. Morgan had the rifle reassembled and back in the rack before the overhead lights flickered on. She slid silently behind a storage cabinet just as Master Sergeant Wilson entered the room. Wilson moved directly to the center of the armory, his eyes scanning the space. He didn't call out, didn't announce his presence. Instead, he simply stood listening, waiting. "I know you're in here, Morgan," he finally said, his voice unnervingly calm. "You might as well come out." For several heartbeats, silence hung in the air. Then Morgan stepped from behind the cabinet, her face betraying no emotion. "Sergeant Wilson," she acknowledged. Wilson's expression remained neutral. "Breaking into the armory is a serious offense, trainee. Grounds for immediate dismissal from the program. Possibly court-martial." "Yes, Sergeant." "Want to tell me what you're doing here at Euro 530? Morgan met his gaze evenly. "Preparing my equipment, Sergeant. By breaking into a secured facility. By ensuring my rifle performs to standard." Wilson's eyes narrowed. "The armory staff maintains these weapons to military specifications. Military specifications are insufficient for precision work beyond 800 meters, Morgan replied, her voice matter-of-fact. "The scope on my assigned rifle has excessive turret play. The trigger pull is inconsistent by approximately 4 ounces. The bolt requires polishing." Wilson studied her for a long moment, then moved to the rack and removed her rifle. He worked the bolt, checked the trigger pull, examined the scope adjustments. His expression revealed nothing, but the slight tightening around his eyes confirmed her assessment. "And you determined all this how?" he asked, replacing the rifle. "Experience, Sergeant." Wilson moved closer, his voice dropping. The kind of experience an intelligence analyst wouldn't have. Morgan remained silent. I spoke with Colonel Carter yesterday, Wilson continued. He seems to think you're some kind of special case. Mentioned a unit I've never heard of. Black Viper. The name hung in the air between them. Morgan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Pain. Something deeper that Wilson couldn't quite identify. Carter thinks you're here for a reason, Wilson pressed. Says someone very powerful wants all traces of your former unit erased. Says you might be in danger. He paused. Or that we might be. Colonel Carter talks too much. Morgan finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Is he right? Are you here because you're running from something or toward it? Morgan's gaze shifted slightly, focusing on a point beyond Wilson's shoulder. Both, Sergeant. Before Wilson could respond, the door to the armory swung open again. Bishop stood in the doorway, surprise registering on his face at finding Morgan and Wilson inside. Sergeant Wilson, Bishop said, straightening to attention. Didn't expect to find anyone here this early. Stand easy, Bishop, Wilson replied. What brings you to the armory before hours? Bishop's eyes shifted to Morgan, then back to Wilson. Wanted to check my rifle before today's training, Sergeant. Make sure everything's in order. Seems to be a popular idea this morning, Wilson remarked dryly. Well, since you're both so eager, you can help the armorer when he arrives. Full maintenance check on all training rifles. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. And Morgan next time used the front door, during regular hours. After Wilson departed, an uncomfortable silence settled between Morgan and Bishop. Bishop moved to his assigned rifle, removing it from the rack with exaggerated care. Interesting morning ritual you've got, he commented, examining his weapon, breaking into secured facilities. Morgan didn't respond, her attention seemingly focused on organizing the maintenance tools on a nearby workbench. You know what else is interesting? Bishop continued. Your shooting yesterday. Pretty impressive for someone who's never seen combat. Still, Morgan remained silent. That tattoo on your wrist, Bishop pressed, his voice hardening. Black snake around a bullet. Never seen that insignia before. What unit is that from? Morgan finally looked up, meeting his gaze. It's personal, Bishop, not unit related. Bullshit, Bishop spat. Everything about you is bullshit. Your record, your background, the way you handle a weapon. He moved closer, looming over her smaller frame. I've served with Delta Force operators who don't move as quietly as you do. Who the hell are you really? For a long moment, Morgan simply held his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. I'm just a trainee, Bishop, same as you. No, Bishop countered, his voice dropping to a near whisper. No, you're something else entirely, and I'm going to find out what. The door opened again as the armorer arrived, ending their confrontation. Bishop moved back, but his eyes remained fixed on Morgan with suspicious intensity. A silent promise that this wasn't over. Morgan returned to organizing the tools, her face revealing nothing. But beneath her calm exterior, alarm bells were ringing. Bishop was connecting dots he shouldn't even be able to see. A dangerous development she hadn't anticipated. Time was running out faster than she had planned. Colonel Raymond Carter sat alone in his office, the blinds drawn against the morning sun. On his desk lay a classified file marked with the highest security clearances. Inside were documents that officially didn't exist. Operation reports that had been purged from Pentagon databases. Mission briefings for operations that would never appear in any historical record. The file was labeled simply Blackstone. Carter's hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. Photographs of 12 operators, their faces clear in these classified documents. 12 elite snipers deployed to Mosul, Iraq in 2019 for what was supposed to be a precision elimination of a high-value target. 12 who entered the city under cover of darkness. Only one returned. The last page contained a single black and white photograph. A woman, her face half hidden in shadow with a distinctive tattoo visible on her wrist. The file identified her as Operative 12, Alexandra Morgan. Carter closed the file and reached for his secure phone. He dialed a number from memory, waited through several encrypted transfers, then spoke when a familiar voice answered. It's Carter. She's here. At Benning. He listened to the response, his expression growing increasingly troubled. Yes, I understand the implications. No, I haven't confronted her directly yet. Wilson is keeping close watch. Yes, I'm aware of the risks. The voice on the other end spoke at length. Carter's grip on the phone tightened. With all due respect, sir, that option is premature. Morgan was the best we ever fielded. If she's resurfaced now, there's a reason. He paused, listening again. No, sir, I don't believe she's a threat to national security. If anything, she may be the only one who knows what really happened in Mosul. The response from the other end was brief, clipped. Yes, sir. Understood. I'll continue monitoring the situation. Carter's jaw tightened. But, sir, if I may, these were our people. We owe them the truth, whatever it is. Carter hung up the phone, his weathered face set in grim determination. He opened his desk drawer and removed a small device that resembled a pager, a secure communicator that couldn't be tracked or intercepted. He typed a brief message. Viper in the nest, proceed with caution. Carter sent the message, then returned the device to his drawer. The wheels were in motion now. For 3 years, the truth about Operation Blackstone had remained buried, hidden behind classified designations and national security directives. But Alexandra Morgan's appearance at Fort Benning had changed everything. The last Black Viper was hunting. And Carter knew from bitter experience that when these predators set their sights on a target, nothing survived. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the advanced sniper course. 24 trainees lay prone behind their rifles, sweat soaking through their uniforms as they engaged targets at varying distances. The range extended out to 1,200 meters, where human-sized silhouettes barely registered as specks against the distant hillside. Morgan settled behind her rifle, her breathing slow and measured. Through her scope, she observed the target with detached precision. Wind flags indicated a 7-month crosswind from the west. Heat mirage rippled through her optic, distorting the air above the sun-baked ground. Variables to be calculated, compensated for. Range is hot, Wilson announced through a megaphone. You will engage targets at 800 yards, 900 yards, 1,000, and 200 meters. 2 rounds per target. You have 8 minutes to complete the course of fire. Morgan made minute adjustments to her scope, dialing in elevation and windage. The formulas calculating bullet drop and wind drift ran automatically through her mind, as natural as breathing after years of practice. Commence fire, Wilson ordered. The range erupted with the sharp cracks of 24 rifles firing in staggered sequence. Morgan waited, watching through her scope as other trainees engaged their targets, observing their techniques, their mistakes. Bishop, 2 positions to her left, fired methodically. His form was excellent, his breathing controlled. A true professional. Through her peripheral vision, Morgan noticed him glancing in her direction between shots. Still watching. Still suspicious. When half the class had completed their firing sequence, Morgan finally took aim at her first target. She inhaled deeply, then released half her breath, holding the remainder. Her finger took up the slack in the trigger, applying pressure with microscopic precision. The rifle barked, the recoil absorbed smoothly into her shoulder. Through her scope, she watched as the round struck dead center on the 800-meter target. Without pause, she transitioned to the 900-meter target, made a slight adjustment for increased elevation, and fired again. Another perfect hit. The 1,000-meter target required more significant adjustment. Morgan calculated the wind drift at this extended distance, compensating for the subtle changes in velocity she had detected. Her third shot struck slightly left of center, but still well within the kill zone. For the 200-meter target, she paused longer, sensing a shift in the wind. She waited patient as death itself until the conditions aligned perfectly with her calculations. Her final round struck exactly where she had aimed, punching through the center of the distant silhouette. 4 shots, 4 hits, textbook precision. As the firing died down, Wilson moved among the trainees, evaluating their targets through a spotting scope. He reached Morgan's position last. 4 for 4, Morgan, he noted, his voice neutral. Clean shots. Morgan nodded acknowledgement but said nothing. Almost too clean, Wilson added quietly so only she could hear. Like you were holding back. Morgan met his gaze, her expression carefully blank. Just executing the course as instructed, Sergeant. Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly. Tomorrow's exercise increases in difficulty. Unknown distance targets. No wind flags. Simulated combat conditions. He paused. No holding back. As Wilson moved away, Bishop approached, his own rifle slung over his shoulder. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with intensity. Not bad shooting for a desk jockey, he remarked, his voice carrying just enough for nearby trainees to hear. Morgan began clearing her weapon, her movements precise and economical. Thank you, Bishop. You know what's interesting about combat snipers? Bishop continued, seemingly casual, but with an undercurrent of tension. The real ones, the ones who've put rounds on actual human beings. Morgan remained silent, focusing on her weapon. They develop certain habits, Bishop pressed. Ways of moving, ways of breathing when they shoot. He leaned closer. You shoot like someone who's killed before Morgan. Many times. Morgan finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. Is there a question in there somewhere, Bishop? Yeah, there is. Bishop's voice dropped to a near whisper. Who did you kill with skills like that? And why are you pretending to be something you're not? Before Morgan could respond, an unfamiliar voice cut through the tension. Impressive shooting across the board, Colonel Carter announced, approaching with measured steps. Wilson tells me this class has exceptional potential. The trainees straightened to attention as Carter moved among them, offering brief comments and observations. When he reached Morgan and Bishop, he paused. Bishop, I've reviewed your file. Distinguished service in Afghanistan with the 75th Ranger Regiment. Your combat experience will be valuable to your fellow trainees. Thank you, sir, Bishop replied, eyes front. Carter turned to Morgan. For a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, awareness. Morgan, Carter said simply, follow me, please. I need to discuss your performance evaluation. As Morgan fell in beside the colonel, Bishop's eyes followed them, narrowed in suspicion. The interaction had been brief, formal, but something in Carter's tone suggested familiarity. Another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. Carter led Morgan away from the firing line toward the administrative building at the edge of the range. Neither spoke until they were well out of earshot of the other trainees. You're drawing attention, Carter said quietly, his eyes scanning the surroundings as they walked. Bishop is asking questions. Bishop is observant, Morgan replied. It's what makes him a good soldier. It's what will get him killed if he keeps pushing, Carter countered grimly. Or you. They reached the building and entered through a side door that led directly to a small conference room. Carter closed the door behind them, then checked that the blinds were completely drawn before turning to face Morgan. Why are you here, he asked directly. After 3 years of hiding, why resurface now at my training facility, of all places? Morgan met his gaze evenly. You know why. Blackstone, Carter said the word heavy with implication. Morgan nodded once. It's happening again. Same pattern, same players. Carter's expression darkened. What do you mean? 3 weeks ago, a CIA operative was killed in Baghdad. Officially, it was labeled as a terrorist attack. Morgan's voice remained calm, but her eyes burned with intensity. His name was Alan Davis. He was investigating financial transfers between defense contractors and private accounts in the Cayman Islands. I don't see the connection to Blackstone, Carter replied, though his expression suggested otherwise. The money trail led back to General Lawrence Marshall, the same man who authorized Operation Blackstone. Morgan's gaze never wavered. The same man who fed us false intelligence that sent 12 operators into a trap. Carter's face paled slightly. Marshall is one of the most decorated officers in the Pentagon, Deputy Director of the Joint Special Operations Command. He has the president's ear. He's also responsible for the deaths of 11 of the best snipers our country ever produced, Morgan replied, her voice finally betraying emotion. My team, my family. Carter moved to a chair and sank into it suddenly, looking every one of his 63 years. You have proof of this? I'm gathering it, Morgan said. That's why I'm here. Fort Benning houses the secure communications node that Marshall used to transmit the compromised intelligence for Blackstone. I need access to those archives. Carter's eyes widened. Those are level 5 classified systems. Even I can't access them without special authorization. I don't need your access, Morgan replied. I just need you not to interfere. Carter studied her face, searching for something. For 3 years, I believed you were dead, along with the others. The official report said all 12 operators were killed in action. That was convenient for Marshall, Morgan said. Dead operators can't contradict the official narrative. But you survived, Carter pressed. How? Morgan's expression hardened. I was the spotter on Overwatch for Michael Reeves. Position 12, the farthest from the ambush point. Her voice became distant, as if recalling events from another lifetime. When the shooting started, I knew immediately something was wrong. The enemy knew exactly where our teams were positioned, exactly when to strike. She moved to the window, peering through a narrow gap in the blinds. I tried to warn the others. It was too late. I watched through my scope as they were cut down one by one. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I couldn't save them. Carter remained silent, allowing her to continue at her own pace. I made it out of Mosul using back channels, contacts outside official military networks. I knew if I reported in, I'd be eliminated too. Morgan turned back to face him. I've spent 3 years gathering intelligence, tracking money trails, building a case against Marshall. Why not take what you have to the authorities? The evidence isn't conclusive yet, and Marshall has too many allies in high places. Morgan's expression was resolute. I need the communication logs from Blackstone. The original intelligence briefing, not the sanitized version that appeared in the after-action report. Carter stood, his decision made. What do you need from me? 3 things, Morgan replied. First, keep me in the sniper program. It provides perfect cover for my presence here. Done. What else? Second, find out who else at Benning was involved in Blackstone. Marshall wouldn't have acted alone. He would have had someone on the ground to ensure the operation proceeded according to his plan. Carter nodded grimly. And the third thing, Morgan's hand moved to her side where the outline of a small caliber pistol was barely visible beneath her uniform shirt. When the time comes, don't get in my way. The implications hung heavily in the air between them. Carter's expression was troubled, but he didn't object. The code of the special operations community was clear. You don't abandon your own, and you don't let betrayal go unpunished. 3 days ago, I received intelligence that Marshall is planning to visit Fort Benning next week. Morgan continued. Official purpose is to review training protocols for special operations snipers. And the real purpose, he knows I'm alive, Morgan said simply, and he's coming to finish what he started in Mosul. Carter moved to the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. Morgan, if you're right about Marshall, you're taking on one of the most powerful men in the U.S. military. Even if you succeed, they'll hunt you for the rest of your life. Morgan's expression didn't change, but something cold and deadly flickered in her eyes. They've been hunting me for 3 years, Colonel. Now it's my turn to hunt them. As Carter opened the door, Morgan added one final chilling observation. In Black Viper, we had a saying, the best shots go unnoticed because nobody dies. But sometimes, Colonel, sometimes they remember. Carter left the room, closing the door behind him. In the empty corridor, he paused, the weight of Morgan's words settling heavily upon his shoulders. The last Black Viper had emerged from the shadows, and blood would inevitably follow. The night settled over Fort Benning like a heavy shroud. Stars pierced the darkness above the sprawling military installation, their ancient light bearing silent witness to the deadly game unfolding below. Alexandra Morgan stood motionless in the shadow of a maintenance building, her slight frame nearly invisible against the darkened wall. Her eyes, adapted to the night, scanned the compound with predatory focus. 3 years of hiding. 3 years of gathering intelligence, building a case against the man who had betrayed her team. 3 years of living as a ghost while carrying the weight of 11 dead operators on her conscience. Now she was close. So close to the evidence that would bring down General Lawrence Marshall and expose the truth about Operation Blackstone. Morgan checked her watch. 2:30 hours. The security patrol had passed 6 minutes ago, maintaining the precise schedule she had observed over the past week. Military efficiency, predictable, exploitable. She moved silently across the open ground between buildings, her footfalls making no sound on the damp earth. The communications center loomed ahead, its darkened windows reflecting the faint moonlight. Level 5 classified systems, the most secure networks in the military intelligence community, accessible only to those with the highest clearances and specific authorization codes. Morgan had neither. What she did have was 3 years of planning and a debt to the dead that could only be paid in truth or blood. The side entrance was secured by a keycard reader and fingerprint scanner. Standard military protocol for sensitive installations. Morgan removed a small electronic device from her pocket, attaching it to the keycard reader. The screen flickered as the device cycled through thousands of access combinations. Within 30 seconds, the reader flashed green. Phase 1 complete. The fingerprint scanner presented a different challenge. Morgan reached into her pocket again, extracting a thin film embedded with artificial fingerprints. Technology acquired from sources best left unnamed, paid for with funds she'd extracted from accounts Marshall thought were secure. There was a certain poetry in using the general's own black-budget resources against him. The scanner accepted the counterfeit print. The door unlocked with an audible click. Morgan slipped inside, immediately ducking into a service alcove as the motion-activated lights illuminated the corridor. She waited, counting heartbeats, ensuring no silent alarms had been triggered. The server room lay at the end of the hallway behind another secured door. This one required a 6-digit access code that changed daily. Morgan had observed Colonel Carter entering the code 2 days prior, memorizing the sequence and calculating the algorithm used for the daily changes. Simple mathematics. Predictable. She entered the code. The lock disengaged. Morgan stepped into the climate-controlled server room, the hum of cooling systems masking any sound of her entry. Rows of black server cabinets filled the space, each housing terabytes of classified military intelligence. The digital repository of America's most sensitive operations. Morgan moved directly to the terminal in the corner. The computer required administrative credentials to access the classified archives. She inserted a USB drive containing specialized software designed to bypass security protocols. Within minutes, she had gained access to the system. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, navigating through layers of security to locate the Blackstone files. The operation had been scrubbed from most military databases, but the original communication logs would still exist in the deep archive. Every transmission, every order, every piece of intelligence that had sent 12 elite snipers to their deaths. Morgan found the file directory marked JSOC Special Operations 2019. Inside were subdirectories organized by operational designation. She scrolled down to B and found it Blackstone. Her heart rate increased slightly, the only external sign of her emotional response. She opened the directory. Empty. The files had been purged. Morgan's expression remained neutral, but her mind raced. The files couldn't be gone. Not completely. Not from this system. She initiated a deeper search using recovery protocols designed to locate deleted data fragments. The screen flickered as the search progressed. Then results began to appear. Fragments, pieces of communications, orders, intelligence briefs, the digital breadcrumbs of a classified operation someone had tried to erase. Morgan began downloading the recovered data to her secure drive. As the transfer progressed, she scanned through the partially reconstructed files. Operational details emerged. 12 sniper teams positioned across Mosul. Target profile of an ISIS commander named Abu Bakr al-Rawi. Intelligence suggesting a high-level meeting at a specific location. Then she found it. The smoking gun. An intelligence brief marked eyes only with General Marshall's digital signature. The brief contained the exact coordinates where each sniper team should position. Detailed descriptions of approach routes, observation points, fields of fire. Information so precise it could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of the operation, knowledge that had been fed directly to the enemy. As the final files transferred, Morgan heard a sound from the hallway. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose toward the server room. She quickly removed her drive and shut down the terminal, erasing all traces of her access. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Voices low and urgent. Morgan scanned the room for escape routes. A ventilation duct in the ceiling. Too small. A maintenance closet. Potential dead end. The door handle turned. Morgan pressed herself against the wall behind a server rack, drawing the compact pistol from her concealed holster. A weapon of last resort. If she had to use it, her mission was already compromised. The door swung open. 2 military police officers entered, flashlights sweeping across the room. "Security alert in this sector," one officer said. "System detected unauthorized access." "Check the terminals," the other replied. "I'll sweep the perimeter." The officers moved methodically through the server room, checking each row, each corner. Morgan remained motionless, controlling her breathing. The officer approached her position, flashlight beam sweeping just inches from her feet. A radio crackled. "All units, we have a perimeter breach at the east fence line. Multiple intruders. Respond immediately." The officers hesitated, then turned toward the door. "This can wait. East fence is priority." After they departed, Morgan waited 30 seconds before moving. The perimeter breach was unexpected. Coincidence or interference? It didn't matter. It had provided the distraction she needed. She slipped out of the server room and moved swiftly down the corridor, retracing her entry path. Outside emergency lights had activated near the eastern perimeter, the perfect cover for her escape in the opposite direction. Morgan disappeared into the shadows, the recovered data secure in her possession. The first real evidence against Marshall. Now she needed to decrypt it, analyze it, and find the connections that would expose the truth about Blackstone. The ghosts of Mosul were finally speaking, and they were calling for justice. The morning sun beat down on the advanced sniper course as trainees assembled in full battle gear. Today's exercise would push them beyond standard marksmanship into the realm of combat sniper operations. The field was configured to simulate an urban environment with structures of varying heights and hidden targets at unknown distances. Master Sergeant Wilson stood before the assembled class, his weathered face betraying no emotion. Today, we evaluate your ability to operate under battlefield conditions. No wind flags, no range markers, no spotters. His eyes swept across the trainees, lingering briefly on Morgan. You'll navigate the course independently, engaging targets of opportunity while maintaining concealment. This is not just about shooting, it's about remaining invisible. Bishop shifted his weight beside Morgan, his equipment precisely arranged for optimal field performance. Sounds like my kind of party, he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. Let's see how intelligence analysts handle real combat scenarios. Morgan didn't respond, her attention focused on Wilson's briefing. You will be evaluated on target acquisition, shot placement, and most importantly, your ability to remain undetected throughout the exercise. Wilson continued. In real combat, a sniper who reveals his position dies, and so do his teammates. The words carried special weight for Morgan. Memories of Mosul flashed unbidden through her mind, the crackle of radio communications as her teammates were systematically eliminated, the helplessness of watching through her scope as they died one by one, the knowledge that they had been betrayed by their own command. Morgan, Wilson called, interrupting her thoughts. You're first on the course. Bishop smirked beside her. Good luck, desk jockey. Morgan moved forward, collecting her rifle from the weapon rack. The familiar weight settled against her shoulder, an extension of her body rather than a separate tool. She checked the chamber, verified her ammunition, and awaited further instructions. Wilson approached, lowering his voice. This course is designed to flush out those who aren't ready for real combat operations. No amount of range practice can prepare you for this if you haven't lived it. His eyes held a question. Are you sure you want to proceed? Morgan met his gaze evenly. Yes, Sergeant. Wilson nodded once. You have 30 minutes to complete the course. Radio silence except for emergencies. Observers will track your progress through thermal imaging. He gestured toward the course entrance. Time starts now. Morgan entered the simulated battlefield, immediately dropping to a low profile. The environment consisted of mock buildings, abandoned vehicles, and varied terrain designed to challenge movement and concealment. She analyzed the layout, identifying likely observation points and fields of fire. Rather than moving directly into the course, Morgan circled to the western perimeter. The sun at her back would make observation more difficult for anyone facing her direction. Basic tactics but effective. She selected her first movement route, staying low and using available cover. The first target appeared 6 minutes into the course, a silhouette partially visible through a second-story window, approximately 400 meters away. An easy shot for a trained marksman. Too easy. Morgan studied the positioning. The target was clearly visible with optimal firing lines from multiple approaches. A trap. In real combat, the obvious target would be bait with counter-snipers positioned to eliminate anyone who took the shot. She bypassed the obvious target, continuing her movement along the western edge of the course. 3 minutes later, she spotted what others would miss, a shadow within a shadow at the base of a water tower. A concealed target visible only from specific angles and only to those patient enough to look beyond the obvious. Morgan positioned herself behind an abandoned vehicle using its frame for cover. She calculated the range at 550 meters with a slight crosswind from the north. The target was positioned to minimize its visibility with just a small portion exposed. A challenging shot requiring precision and confidence. She settled her breathing, her heart rate slowing through practice control. The world narrowed to the view through her scope, all extraneous information filtered away. She took up the trigger, slack with microscopic precision, the final pressure applied between heartbeats. The rifle barked once the sound echoing across the course. Through her scope, Morgan watched the round strike center mass on the concealed target. A perfect hit. Rather than remaining in position, she immediately moved. In actual combat, a sniper's position is compromised the moment they fire. Remaining stationary is a death sentence. Morgan relocated 50 meters east, selecting a new vantage point among scrub brush that offered both concealment and observation lanes. The exercise continued in this pattern. Locate, evaluate, engage, relocate, each target more challenging than the last, each shot requiring perfect execution under increasingly difficult conditions. Through it all, Morgan moved like a ghost, her presence betrayed only by the impact of her rounds on distant targets. In the observation tower overlooking the course, Wilson tracked her progress through binoculars, his expression growing increasingly troubled. Beside him, Colonel Carter watched with the knowing eye of a veteran special operations commander. She's not even trying to follow the expected route, Wilson noted as Morgan disappeared behind a ridge, only to emerge 2 minutes later in an entirely different sector. Every other trainee takes the central corridor because that's where the majority of targets are positioned. Carter nodded, because that's what they've been trained to do. Follow the path of least resistance to maximum target engagement. She's bypassing easy shots to find the hidden ones, Wilson continued, targets that most trainees never even locate. That's because she's not training for a course evaluation, Carter replied quietly. She's hunting as if her life depends on it. Wilson lowered his binoculars, turning to face Carter directly. Sir, with all due respect, who the hell is she really? No intelligence analyst moves like that. No conventional sniper thinks like that. Carter remained silent for a long moment, his eyes tracking Morgan's nearly invisible progress through the course. I told you before, Black Viper, a unit that officially never existed. I've served with operators from every special mission unit in JSOC, Wilson countered. Delta, DevGru, 24th STS. Activity, I've never seen anyone move like her. It's not just skill, it's like she's a different species, Carter finished for him. That's because Black Viper wasn't just another special operations unit. They were something else entirely. Before Wilson could respond, a commotion erupted at the edge of the course. Bishop had apparently abandoned his waiting position and entered the training area without authorization. He moved with purpose toward Morgan's last known location, his rifle at the ready. What the hell is Bishop doing? Wilson snapped, reaching for his radio. He's not scheduled for another 20 minutes. Carter's expression darkened. Something's wrong. That's not standard breach of protocol. He's hunting her. Bishop moved through the course with practiced stealth tracking Morgan's path through subtle disturbances in the terrain. Broken twigs, displaced stones, the nearly invisible signs that only a trained tracker would notice. His mind raced with connections and suspicions that had crystallized into certainty during the night. After the previous day's training, he had accessed Fort Benning's secure network, using credentials that technically exceeded his authorization level. A risk, but a calculated one. He had searched for any record of Alexandra Morgan's previous service. What he found, or rather what he didn't find, confirmed his suspicions. Her service record was suspiciously incomplete. Large gaps existed where detailed information should have been. References to classified assignments without specific details. The digital fingerprints of a manufactured identity. Then he had discovered something else. A heavily redacted after-action report from a classified operation in Mosul, Iraq in 2019. Operation Blackstone. The report indicated total mission failure with catastrophic casualties. 12 operators killed in action. But the report contained inconsistencies, details that didn't align with standard operational parameters, and a curious reference to a survivor initially reported as KIA Operative 12. Bishop hadn't slept, connecting fragments of information throughout the night. Morgan's tattoo with the number 12. Her extraordinary skills that went far beyond conventional military training. Her apparent familiarity with Colonel Carter. The pieces formed a picture that defied official records but aligned with whispered legends among special operations communities. Stories of a shadowy unit of elite snipers that operated outside normal command structures. Black Viper. Now Bishop moved with purpose, driven by a conviction that transcended mere suspicion. Morgan was not who she claimed to be, and he intended to confront her alone away from the oversight of Wilson and Carter. He caught sight of her position near an abandoned vehicle at the eastern edge of the course. She was setting up for another shot, her attention focused downrange. Bishop approached from her blind spot, his footfall silent on the soft earth. At 15 meters, Morgan suddenly went rigid. Without turning, she spoke just loudly enough for him to hear. "That's close enough, Bishop." Bishop froze, his rifle held at the low ready. "How long have you known I was following you?" "Since you entered the course." Morgan slowly turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Your breathing gives you away. Too heavy on the inhale." Bishop's jaw tightened. "I accessed your service record last night, or what passes for it. Lot of convenient gaps." "Accessing classified personnel files without authorization is a court-martial offense," Morgan replied calmly. "So is impersonating a military intelligence officer," Bishop countered, "which is what I think you're doing." Morgan said nothing, her eyes watchful and evaluating. "I found references to Operation Blackstone," Bishop continued. "Mosul 2019, 12 operators deployed, 12 reported KIA. He gestured toward her wrist. "That tattoo, Black Viper, the number 12, you're not just some analyst, are you?" For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Morgan spoke, her voice low and controlled. "What do you want, Bishop?" "The truth," he replied immediately. "What really happened in Mosul? Who are you really, and why are you at Benning now?" Before Morgan could respond, the radio on Bishop's tactical vest crackled to life with Wilson's angry voice. "Bishop, you are in violation of direct orders. Exit the training area immediately." Bishop ignored the command, his eyes locked on Morgan. "I'm not leaving until I get answers." "And this isn't the time or place, Bishop," Morgan replied, glancing briefly toward the observation tower where Wilson and Carter were undoubtedly watching. "It's exactly the time," Bishop insisted, taking a step closer. "You show up with skills no analyst could possess. Colonel Carter treats you like some kind of secret weapon. You break into secured facilities in the middle of the night." Morgan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You've been watching me." "Damn right I have," Bishop confirmed. "And last night you accessed the communications center. Level 5 classified systems." "Want to explain that?" The radio crackled again. "Bishop Wilson, return to start point immediately. That's a direct order." Morgan's expression changed subtly, a calculation occurring behind her eyes. "You don't understand what you're involving yourself in, Bishop. Walk away, for your own safety." "Not happening," Bishop replied firmly. "Whatever you're involved in, whatever Operation Blackstone really was, it's eating you alive. I've seen that look before, in operators who've lost their entire teams." For the first time, something like genuine emotion flickered across Morgan's face, a momentary crack in her carefully maintained facade. Bishop recognized the expression, the raw pain of a soldier who had survived when others didn't. 11 dead operators. Bishop continued, pressing his advantage. "And you, the sole survivor. That's a hell of a burden to carry alone." Morgan's hand moved imperceptibly toward the concealed sidearm at her waist. Bishop noticed the movement but didn't react. "I'm not your enemy, Morgan," he said, his voice softening slightly. "But I need to know what I've stumbled into. If there's some kind of operation happening at Benning, something unofficial, I deserve to know, especially if it puts other soldiers at risk." Morgan seemed to reach a decision. She glanced toward the observation tower, then back to Bishop. "Meet me at the old ammunition bunker on the North Range at 2300 hours. Come alone." Her eyes hardened. "And Bishop, if you're wearing a wire or planning to bring someone else, don't bother coming at all." Before Bishop could respond, the distinctive crack of a rifle shot echoed across the training area. Instinctively, both soldiers dropped to a defensive crouch, scanning for the source. That came from outside the course perimeter, Bishop said, his tactical training immediately overriding the tension of their confrontation. Morgan was already moving, her rifle brought to bear as she scanned the tree line beyond the training area. 3 o'clock elevated position, approximately 800 meters. Bishop followed her gaze, seeing nothing. "How can you be sure?" "Because that's where I would take the shot from," Morgan replied grimly. Wilson's voice erupted from the radio again, this time with unmistakable urgency. All trainees emergency recall. Return to start point immediately. This is not a drill. Bishop keyed his radio. Wilson, this is Bishop. What's happening? Live fire incident outside authorized parameters. Wilson responded tersely. Security breach. All personnel to designated safe zones immediately. Morgan was already moving not toward the start point, but toward the perimeter where the shot had originated. Bishop hesitated only briefly before following her. Morgan, the order was to return to start point, he called after her. That wasn't a stray round, she replied without slowing. That was a sniper shot. Precision, targeted. At what? Bishop demanded, keeping pace beside her. There are no targets in that sector. Morgan stopped abruptly, turning to face him with an intensity that made Bishop take an involuntary step back. Not what? Who? Her eyes bore into his with chilling certainty. They're here for me, see, and they just fired their first warning shot. The Colonel Raymond Carter moved swiftly through the administrative building flanked by military police. Emergency protocols had been activated throughout Fort Benning following the unauthorized weapons discharge near the training area. All non-essential personnel were confined to quarters. Security checkpoints had been established at key installations. Carter entered the command center where Fort Benning's head of security, Major Frank Harris, coordinated the response. Status report, Carter demanded as he approached the main console. Harris looked up from the tactical display. Single high-velocity round fired from the northeast woods approximately 40 minutes ago. No casualties reported. We've secured the area, but the shooter is gone. Ballistics initial analysis suggests .300 Winchester Magnum, professional grade. Harris's expression was grim. Sir, this wasn't some civilian who wandered onto the post. The firing position was expertly selected. Clear sight lines to the training area with multiple escape routes. Carter's jaw tightened. Any surveillance footage? Nothing useful. Whoever this was knew our camera positions and blind spots. Harris lowered his voice. Sir, this has the hallmarks of a professional, military or intelligence background. I want all security footage for the past 48 hours reviewed, Carter ordered. Check every vehicle that entered post, and I want the ballistics analysis expedited. Yes, sir. Harris hesitated. Colonel, there's something else. The trajectory analysis indicates the round was fired directly toward the advanced sniper course. If it had been 6 inches lower, it would have struck trainee Morgan. Carter's expression remained neutral, but his eyes betrayed his concern. Has Morgan been located? That's the other issue, sir. When the emergency recall was initiated, Morgan and Bishop didn't return to the start point. They were last seen moving toward the northeast perimeter. Find them, Carter ordered. Priority 1. As Harris turned to issue the necessary commands, Carter moved to a secure communications terminal in the corner of the room. He entered his credentials and initiated a heavily encrypted connection. The screen remained blank, but a voice emerged from the speaker, male authoritative guarded. Switchboard. This is Daylight, Carter replied, using his designated call sign. We have movement. Viper is being targeted. A pause. Confirmation. Sniper shot. Professional grade. Intentional miss, but message received. Understood. Package status. Carter glanced over his shoulder, ensuring no one was within earshot. Viper has the package. Contents unknown at this time. Appears to be digital intelligence. Containment priority, Koik. Carter hesitated, the implications of the question clear. Negative on containment. I repeat, negative. Viper is an asset, not a target. Another pause, longer this time. That determination is not yours to make, Daylight. Operation parameters are clear. Parameters have changed, Carter insisted. Viper has intelligence critical to national security. Elimination would compromise that intelligence. Stand by for new instructions, the voice replied. Maintain surveillance on Viper. Report any attempt to exit the installation. The connection terminated abruptly. Carter stared at the blank screen, the weight of what he'd just done settling heavily upon him. He had just defied direct orders from his superiors, placing his career, possibly his freedom, in jeopardy. But the alternative was unacceptable. He would not be party to the elimination of one of America's most valuable operators, especially one who might hold the truth about a betrayal that had cost 11 lives. Carter returned to the main command console, his decision made. Major Harris, I'm implementing security protocol Echo 7. My authorization only. Harris looked up in surprise. Echo 7 was rarely invoked, reserved for situations involving credible threats to senior leadership or critical infrastructure. Yes, sir. May I ask the reason? Trainee Morgan may have been specifically targeted, Carter replied, crafting his words carefully. Her background includes sensitive intelligence work that could make her a high-value target for foreign operatives. The explanation was plausible enough to avoid immediate questions. Harris nodded, turning to implement the protocol. One more thing, Carter added. I want any information about Morgan's whereabouts reported directly to me. No one else. Understood. Yes, sir, Harris replied, his expression betraying a hint of confusion at the unusual request. Carter exited the command center, moving with purpose toward his office. He had set events in motion that could not be easily reversed. Now he needed to find Morgan before anyone else did, before the forces converging on Fort Benning could eliminate the last surviving member of Black Viper and the evidence she carried. The abandoned ammunition bunker on the northern training range stood like a concrete monument to a bygone era. Constructed during the Cold War to house tactical nuclear artillery shells, it had been decommissioned decades ago when those weapons were removed from the Army's inventory. Now it served primarily as a landmark for land navigation exercises and occasional shelter during severe weather. Morgan arrived at the designated meeting point 30 minutes before the agreed time, approaching from the east to avoid potential surveillance. The night was clear, stars visible above the tree canopy, perfect conditions for thermal imaging from aerial platforms. She had taken precautions using streams and culverts during her approach to mask her heat signature. The bunker entrance was secured with a rusted padlock that yielded easily to her specialized tools. Inside, the air was cool and stale. Concrete walls 3 feet thick surrounded a space roughly 20 by 30 feet. No windows. A single entrance. Defensible, but also a potential trap with limited escape options. Morgan conducted a thorough sweep of the interior, checking for surveillance devices or signs of recent entry. Satisfied that the space was secure, she positioned herself where she could observe the entrance while remaining in shadow. At precisely 2300 hours, Bishop approached. Unlike Morgan, he made no attempt at stealth, walking directly to the bunker entrance with his rifle slung across his back. He paused at the doorway, allowing his eyes to adjust to the darkness within. Morgan, he called softly. Clear the doorway, she replied from the shadows. You're silhouetted. Bishop stepped inside, moving to the side as instructed. Are we alone? For now, Morgan confirmed, remaining partially concealed. Were you followed? No. Bishop scanned the darkness, trying to locate her precise position. I took precautions. What kind of precautions? The kind you learn in Ranger School, Bishop replied. Multiple route changes, false trails, heat signature masking. He paused. Though I suspect my best techniques are probably child's play compared to yours. Morgan finally stepped forward, allowing Bishop to see her clearly. She had changed from her training uniform into nondescript black tactical clothing. A compact pistol was holstered at her waist, and a combat knife was strapped to her thigh. The equipment of someone prepared for conflict. You came armed, Bishop observed. So did you, Morgan countered, nodding toward his rifle. Force of habit, Bishop admitted, especially after what happened on the training course today. He studied her face in the dim light. That shot wasn't random, was it? Someone tried to kill you. Not kill, Morgan corrected. Warn, if they wanted me dead, I would be. Bishop leaned against the concrete wall, maintaining a respectful distance. I think it's time you tell me what's really going on. Morgan assessed him, silently weighing her options. Bishop had already discovered too much to be kept in the dark. His persistence made him both a potential threat and a possible ally. The question was whether she could trust him, whether anyone outside her dead team deserved that trust. What do you know about Operation Blackstone? She finally asked. Only what I could piece together from redacted reports, Bishop replied. Mosul 2019. 12 operators deployed for a high-value target elimination. Mission failed catastrophically. All operators reported killed in action. He paused. Except that wasn't true, was it? You survived. Morgan's expression remained neutral, but her eyes revealed a flash of painful memory. Operative 12, the farthest from the ambush point. So it was an ambush, Bishop confirmed. Not just a mission gone wrong. It was a setup from the beginning, Morgan said, her voice hardening. The intelligence was manufactured. The target location was compromised before we ever set foot in Mosul. 12 operators deployed to precisely calculated positions. Positions that were fed directly to the enemy. Bishop straightened the implications dawning on him. You're saying someone deliberately sacrificed your entire team. Not someone, Morgan clarified. General Lawrence Marshall, Deputy Director of the Joint Special Operations Command. Bishop's expression registered shock. That's a hell of an accusation. Marshall is one of the most decorated officers in the military. He has the president's ear. He also has 11 bodies buried in Arlington that he personally sent to their deaths, Morgan replied coldly. And he's been hunting me for 3 years to make it an even 12. Bishop processed this information, his tactical mind evaluating its plausibility. Why, what possible reason could Marshall have for eliminating his own operators? Morgan reached into a concealed pocket and removed a small data drive. That's what I've spent 3 years trying to determine. Last night I accessed the original communication logs from Blackstone. Marshall thought he'd erase them, but data like that leaves traces. She held up the drive. The intelligence that sent us to Mosul wasn't just wrong, it was deliberately falsified. The coordinates, the target profile, the security assessment, all manipulated to position 12 snipers in locations where they would be most vulnerable. To what end? Bishop pressed. What could possibly justify that kind of betrayal? Money, Morgan stated flatly. 3 weeks before Blackstone, Marshall received a payment of $20 million through a shell corporation in the Caymans. The payment originated from accounts linked to Russian intelligence assets operating in Syria. Bishop's eyes widened. You're saying Marshall sold out American operators to the Russians? Not directly to the Russians, Morgan clarified, to a third party with connections to both Russian intelligence and high-level ISIS commanders. The same ISIS network we were supposedly targeting in Mosul. She placed the drive back in her pocket. The mission was never about eliminating a high-value target. It was about eliminating Black Viper, a unit that had become inconvenient for certain interests, both foreign and domestic. Bishop ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, the enormity of the accusations sinking in. If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond treason. It's unimaginable. And yet it happened, Morgan replied. I watched through my scope as my teammates were systematically eliminated, position by position, each one dying without ever knowing they'd been betrayed by their own command. The raw emotion in her voice penetrated the professional detachment she had maintained. For a brief moment, Bishop glimpsed the weight she had carried for 3 years, survivor's guilt, compounded by the knowledge that their deaths had been orchestrated by someone they had trusted implicitly. That shot today, Bishop said, making connections. Marshall knows you're here, at Benning. Morgan nodded. He's coming to Fort Benning tomorrow, officially to review training protocols for special operations snipers, and unofficially, to eliminate the last loose end from Blackstone, Morgan replied. Me. Bishop studied her face, searching for deception, but finding only cold certainty. Why tell me this? Why trust me with information that could get us both killed? Because you left me no choice, Morgan answered honestly. You were going to keep digging until you found the truth, or until Marshall's people found you. Either way, your life expectancy was measured in days. And now you have a decision to make, Morgan said. Walk away, return to the barracks. Report for training tomorrow as if this conversation never happened. That's the safe play. Bishop straightened, his expression hardening. And the alternative? Help me expose Marshall, Morgan replied simply. Help me get justice for 11 operators who died because they trusted their command. Before Bishop could respond, Morgan's head snapped toward the entrance, her body tensing. Someone's coming. Multiple footsteps. Bishop immediately moved to a defensive position, unslinging his rifle with practiced efficiency. How many? At least 4, Morgan replied, drawing her pistol. Heavy equipment? Military-issue boots. The footsteps approached the bunker entrance, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of weapons being readied. A voice called out from the darkness. Morgan Bishop, this is Master Sergeant Wilson. You are ordered to exit the bunker immediately. Hands visible. No sudden movements. Morgan and Bishop exchanged glances. The situation had just become infinitely more complicated. Wilson is Carter's man, Morgan said quietly, but we can't be certain who else might be with him or whose orders they're really following. Bishop nodded his understanding. In the shadowy world, Morgan had revealed no one could be fully trusted, not even the chain of command they had sworn to obey. Options, Bishop asked, his voice barely audible. Morgan's eyes hardened with resolve. We go out, together, but stay alert. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, be ready to move. Bishop checked his weapon one final time, then nodded. Lead the way, Operative 12. For the first time since they'd met, Morgan's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. It vanished almost immediately, replaced by the cold focus of a predator preparing to face potential threats. She moved toward the entrance, Bishop following close behind, both stepping into a night filled with uncertainty and danger. The hunt for truth had begun in earnest, and before it ended, blood would inevitably flow. Whether that of the hunters or their prey remained to be determined. General Lawrence Marshall stood alone in his Pentagon office, staring at the secure phone on his desk. The call he had just received from Fort Benning security confirmed his worst fears. Alexandra Morgan, Operative 12 from Black Viper, was alive and active, and she had accessed classified systems containing information about Operation Blackstone. At 60 years old, Marshall carried himself with the rigid posture of a lifelong military man. His chest bore rows of ribbons representing decades of service to his country: Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Bronze Star with V, Device for Valor. Physical reminders of a career built on sacrifice and dedication. Or so the official record stated. The truth, as with most things in Marshall's world, was more complicated, more nuanced, darker. He moved to the window overlooking the Pentagon courtyard, watching junior officers hurrying between buildings with the earnest dedication of those who still believed in the system. He had been like them, once believing in absolutes, right and wrong, good and evil, America versus the enemy. 30 years in military intelligence had erased such simplistic notions. The world operated in shades of gray, with shifting alliances and expedient compromises. National security wasn't about moral purity, it was about effective management of threats and opportunities. Sometimes that required difficult decisions, sacrifices for the greater good. Blackstone had been such a sacrifice. 12 operators balanced against intelligence that had saved thousands of American lives. A simple equation from Marshall's perspective. Clean, logical, necessary. Except Morgan had survived, the loose end that refused to be tied off neatly. Marshall returned to his desk, entering his credentials into a secure terminal. The screen displayed his itinerary for the following day. Official schedule inspection, visit to Fort Bennings to review training protocols for Special Operations Sniper programs. Actual purpose oversight of the final phase of containment for Operation Blackstone. Morgan had to be eliminated. The evidence she had gathered had to be secured and destroyed. The truth about Blackstone had to remain buried, not for Marshall's protection, but for the stability of the very institutions that safeguarded American security. Or so he had convinced himself. Marshall opened his desk drawer and removed a satellite phone not connected to any official military or government network. He dialed a memorized number, wading through several encrypted transfers before a voice answered. Switchboard. This is Override, Marshall stated using his designated call sign. Package containment has been compromised. Viper is active at the primary location. Understood. Assets are in position, awaiting final authorization. Marshall hesitated briefly. Carter may be compromised. He's implemented security protocol Echo 7 around the target. Recommendation? Continue as planned, Marshall replied. I arrive on site at 0800 tomorrow. We will proceed with direct oversight. And Carter, Marshall's expression hardened. If he interferes with the operation, contain him as well. Understood. Authorization code required for Phase 3 implementation. Marshall recited a 12-digit alphanumeric sequence from memory. The voice on the other end confirmed receipt. Authorization confirmed. Phase 3 active as of 0800 tomorrow. Marshall ended the call, returning the phone to its secured compartment. Events were accelerating toward their inevitable conclusion. By this time tomorrow, Alexandra Morgan would be eliminated, the evidence she carried destroyed, and the truth about Blackstone permanently buried. A necessary sacrifice for the greater good. At least that's what Marshall told himself as he prepared for the coming confrontation with the ghost of Black Viper, the predator he had created and now had to destroy. The military police escort moved through the pre-dawn darkness of Fort Benning with practiced efficiency. Two Humvees, 8 MPs armed with standard-issue M4 carbines surrounding the unmarked sedan, where Morgan and Bishop sat in tense silence. Their weapons had been confiscated. Their status unclear, not officially detained, but certainly not free. Master Sergeant Wilson had said little after their emergence from the ammunition bunker, simply directing them to the waiting vehicles with the gruff instruction to keep quiet and follow orders. The convoy now headed toward the administrative complex at the heart of the base, red and blue lights flashing, but sirens silent in the early morning hours. Morgan sat perfectly still, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, calculating distances, evaluating threats. Even disarmed, she projected the lethal capability of a predator, temporarily at rest. Bishop watched her from the corner of his eye, still processing the revelations from their interrupted meeting. The betrayal of General Marshall, the deliberate sacrifice of an entire special operations team, the 3-year hunt for the sole survivor. If Morgan's allegations were true, and Bishop increasingly believed they were, then nothing about this situation was as it appeared. Not the military police escort, not the apparent security protocol, not even the chain of command they had sworn to obey. "They're taking us to Carter," Morgan said quietly, breaking the silence. Her voice was pitched just loud enough for Bishop to hear, but not to reach the MP driving their vehicle. "How can you be sure?" Bishop replied, matching her volume. "The route? We're heading to the secure briefing facility, not the MP station." Morgan's gaze remained fixed on the passing landscape. "Carter is implementing containment protocols. Is that good or bad for us?" Morgan's expression revealed nothing. "Depends on whose side Carter is really on." The convoy turned onto a restricted access road leading to a modern 2-story building surrounded by additional security measures. Unlike most facilities at Fort Benning, this one featured reinforced barriers, multiple checkpoints, and surveillance systems typically reserved for installations housing classified operations. As the vehicles passed through the final checkpoint, Morgan's posture subtly shifted. A minute tensing of muscles, a fractional narrowing of eyes. The changes would be imperceptible to most observers, but to Bishop they signaled clear warning. "Something's wrong," Bishop whispered, responding to her body language. Morgan gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Security posture of it is elevated beyond the standard protocols. Extra personnel at the perimeter. Non-standard weapons configuration." Bishop scanned the checkpoint they had just passed, noting the MP carrying a suppressed MK-17 SCAR-H. "Special operations loadout. Not regular base security," Morgan confirmed. "Contracted assets, likely private military contractors." The implications were clear. Someone had brought in specialized operators, men with particular skills and fewer restrictions on their application of violence. The kind of personnel deployed when deniability was as important as lethality. The convoy halted in front of the main entrance. The MPs exited first, establishing a perimeter around the vehicles. Master Sergeant Wilson approached the sedan, opening the door on Morgan's side. "Both of you out," he ordered them. "Keep your hands visible at all times." Morgan complied with fluid grace, Bishop following her lead. The pre-dawn air was crisp against their skin as they stood surrounded by armed personnel. Wilson's expression revealed nothing as he conducted a secondary search, confirming they carried no concealed weapons. "Inside," he directed, gesturing toward the main entrance, where 2 additional guards stood at attention. They entered a lobby featuring reinforced glass and multiple security scanners. Military police manned each station, their expressions professionally neutral, but their eyes alert for any sign of trouble. Wilson led them past the security checkpoints, their special status apparently granting exemption from standard procedures, and into an elevator requiring biometric verification. "Sergeant Wilson," Bishop said as the elevator descended, "what exactly is our status right now?" Wilson's weathered face remained impassive. "Above my pay grade, Bishop. I have orders to deliver you to Colonel Carter." "That's all I know and all you need to know." The elevator opened into a subterranean level not indicated on any directory, a secure area designed for classified briefings and sensitive operations planning. Wilson led them down a sterile corridor to a reinforced door, guarded by 2 soldiers wearing the distinctive shoulder patches of the 75th Ranger Regiment, Bishop's former unit. The Rangers straightened as Wilson approached one of them, scanning a security badge and entering an access code. The door opened to reveal a command center humming with activity. Multiple screens displayed security feeds from throughout Fort Benning. Communications specialists monitored radio traffic. Intelligence analysts reviewed satellite imagery on oversized displays. Colonel Carter stood at the center of this operation, his imposing figure bent over a tactical display table. He looked up as they entered, his expression betraying a flash of relief quickly masked by professional detachment. "Morgan, Bishop." Carter acknowledged them with a curt nod. "Secure the room." At his command, all personnel except Carter, Wilson, Morgan, and Bishop exited the command center. The Rangers closed the door behind them, leaving the four in isolated privacy. Carter's demeanor changed immediately, the rigid formality giving way to urgent intensity. "We don't have much time. General Marshall's plane landed 20 minutes ago. He's currently at the airfield receiving a formal welcome, but he'll be here within the hour." Morgan stepped forward. "You know why he's really coming?" It wasn't a question, but Carter nodded confirmation. "I've been monitoring communications since you arrived at Benning. After you accessed the classified archives, security protocols were activated directly from Marshall's office. Not standard containment procedures. Something else entirely. Phase 3. Morgan said, the designation clearly familiar to her. Black Viper operational terminology for high-value target elimination with extreme prejudice. Carter's expression darkened. "You were right. Marshall isn't just coming to silence a witness. He's implementing a complete purge of all evidence related to Blackstone." Bishop looked between them. "Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on? Why are we in a secure bunker instead of being court-martialed for breaking into classified facilities?" Carter turned to him. "Because Staff Sergeant Bishop, you've become involved in something far beyond normal military operations. Something that officially doesn't exist." He moved to a computer terminal, entering a complex security sequence. One of the large display screens changed to show a classified file marked with the highest security clearances. "Operation Blackstone," Carter explained. "A mission so classified that even acknowledging its existence constitutes a violation of national security protocols." The screen displayed photographs of 12 operators, their faces deliberately blurred but their tactical equipment clearly visible. Each wore a patch showing a black serpent coiled around a bullet. "Black Viper," Carter continued, "the most elite sniper unit ever fielded by any military force. 12 operators with specialized training beyond conventional special forces. Deployed only for the most sensitive elimination missions where success was deemed essential to national security." Bishop's eyes were drawn to the designations beneath each photograph. Operative 1 through Operative 12. His gaze lingered on the final image, a female operator with the number 12 visible on her sleeve. "Morgan," he said quietly, understanding crystallizing in his mind. Carter nodded. "Alexandra Morgan, call sign Phantom, the most naturally gifted long-distance precision shooter the program ever produced. Confirmed kills at distances exceeding 2,500 meters under adverse conditions." Morgan remained expressionless, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of emotion at the mention of her former identity and teammates. 3 years ago," Carter continued, "Black Viper was deployed to Mosul, Iraq for what was designated a critical national security operation. Their mission eliminate a high-level ISIS commander and his entire command structure simultaneously through coordinated sniper fire from 12 different positions throughout the city." The screen changed to show a satellite image of Mosul with 12 positions marked in red around the city center. "The intelligence was meticulous," Carter said. "Detailed information about the target's location, security measures, and timetable. The kind of precision intelligence that special operators dream about." "It was too perfect," Morgan interjected, her voice cold. "Too precise. Too convenient." Carter nodded grimly. The entire operation was a setup. The 12 positions had been compromised before the team ever entered Mosul. Enemy forces were waiting at each location. 11 operators were killed within the first 3 minutes of the operation. Bishop's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. A coordinated ambush requiring advanced knowledge of the mission parameters. Inside information. Provided by the man who authorized the operation, Morgan stated flatly. General Lawrence Marshall. The accusation hung in the air, its weight almost physical in the confined space. "What Morgan accessed from our secure servers confirms it," Carter said, gesturing toward a data drive now connected to the terminal. The original intelligence briefing for Blackstone contains embedded metadata proving it was altered before being transmitted to the operators. Critical security information was deliberately falsified. Approach routes were compromised. Safe houses were compromised. Why? Bishop demanded. Why would a general with Marshall's record betray his own operators? Carter's expression was grim. The intelligence Morgan recovered includes financial records. $20 million transferred to offshore accounts controlled by Marshall originating from sources linked to Russian intelligence operations. He sold us out, Morgan said, the cold fury in her voice unmistakable. 11 operators, 11 Americans, sacrificed for money. Bishop struggled to process the enormity of the betrayal. His entire military career had been built on trust in the chain of command. The belief that whatever challenges and dangers they faced, their leadership would never deliberately sacrifice them. That belief now lay shattered at his feet. If this is true, Bishop said, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil, why are we hiding in a bunker? Why not take this evidence to the highest levels, to the Secretary of Defense, the President? Because Marshall has spent 3 years systematically eliminating anyone who might have knowledge of Blackstone, Carter explained. 3 CIA operatives who helped coordinate the mission died in accidents. 2 Pentagon intelligence analysts committed suicide. The trail of bodies extends beyond our borders to allied intelligence services that provided support for the operation. And now he's coming here, Morgan added, with a security detail of private military contractors who aren't bound by military regulations or rules of engagement. Wilson, who had remained silent throughout this revelation, finally spoke. Sir, with all due respect, I'm having difficulty accepting that a decorated general like Marshall would betray his own country for money. Not just money, Morgan corrected. Power. Marshall isn't working solely for financial gain. He's part of a network of military and intelligence officials across multiple countries who believe they should control foreign policy outside the constraints of democratic oversight. They call themselves the Sentinel Group. Carter nodded confirmation. We've been tracking their activities for years but never had concrete evidence of their operations on American soil. Until now. He turned to Morgan. The data you recovered doesn't just prove Marshall's betrayal in Mosul. It contains communications suggesting plans for similar operations against American personnel in Syria, Ukraine, and the Baltic states. Operations designed to advance Russian interests while appearing to be terrorist attacks or combat casualties. Bishop's expression hardened with growing resolve. So what's the plan? Marshall arrives within the hour with a team of contractors ready to eliminate everyone with knowledge of Blackstone. We're in a secure bunker with limited personnel and no official support. Not quite, Carter replied, moving to another terminal. I've activated contingency protocols developed for precisely this scenario. Trusted personnel only operating on secured communications channels. The screen displayed a tactical map of Fort Benning with key positions marked in blue. We have 14 operators in position, former Delta, and Rangers who served under my command. Men I trust implicitly. Against how many on Marshall's side? Bishop asked. At least 20 contractors, plus whatever base security personnel follow his orders without question, Carter admitted. We're outnumbered and officially operating outside the chain of command. Morgan stepped forward, her demeanor shifting subtly from witness to operator. We don't need numerical superiority. We need precision application of force at the right moment. She moved to the tactical display, studying it with the practiced eye of an elite operator. Marshall will come here first. This facility houses the servers containing the Blackstone files. He'll want to secure or destroy that evidence before eliminating witnesses. Agreed, Carter said. His official schedule includes a briefing in this building at 0900. That gives us less than 40 minutes to prepare. Morgan turned to face them, her expression resolute. I didn't survive Mosul and spend 3 years hunting the truth just to die in a bunker at Fort Benning. Marshall believes he's coming to eliminate the last loose end from Blackstone. Instead, he's walking into our kill zone. Yeah, Bishop nodded, military professionalism overriding any remaining doubts. What do you need me to do? I need what Rangers do best, Morgan replied. Improvise, adapt, overcome. When this starts, it will happen fast. Marshall's team will secure the building. They'll isolate this level. Then they'll breach with overwhelming force. Standard procedure for high-value target elimination. Bishop acknowledged. Shock and awe, maximum violence of action. Except they're not hunting frightened bureaucrats, Morgan said, a dangerous glint in her eyes. They're hunting Black Viper, and they have no idea what that really means. General Lawrence Marshall strode through Fort Benning's administrative complex with the confident bearing of a man accustomed to command. At 60, his physique remained impressive, 6 feet of military precision in a perfectly tailored uniform, adorned with the hardware of a distinguished career. His close-cropped silver hair and penetrating blue eyes completed the image of authority. Behind him walked his security detail, 8 men in nondescript business attire, their bodies betraying the unmistakable bearing of combat veterans despite their civilian appearance. Each carried concealed weapons beneath their jackets. None wore official military identification. The base commander, Brigadier General Thomas, walked beside Marshall, providing the expected tour commentary as they moved through the facility. Marshall listened with practiced attentiveness, nodding at appropriate intervals, while his mind focused entirely on the operation about to unfold. Alexandra Morgan was in this building. After 3 years of hunting, the last Black Viper had finally been cornered. The evidence she had gathered would be eliminated. The truth about Blackstone would die with her. The interests Marshall served would remain protected. Order would be maintained. These justifications had become a mantra over the years, a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. America's true strength lay not in its idealistic proclamations, but in the shadowy operations that maintained its global position. The Sentinel Group understood this reality. They operated beyond the constraints of political whims and public sentiment. They did what was necessary. They approached the elevator leading to the secure briefing facility. Marshall knew Carter had implemented Echo 7 protocols, a desperate attempt to protect Morgan and the evidence she carried. It would make no difference. The outcome had been determined the moment Morgan resurfaced at Fort Benning. "This is where we'll be conducting the Special Operations Review," General Thomas explained as they reached the elevator. "Colonel Carter has assembled the relevant personnel and materials as you requested." Marshall nodded. "Thank you, General. This should be a straightforward assessment. My team will handle the technical aspects while you attend to your regular duties." Thomas hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with being dismissed from a briefing on his own base. "Sir, protocol would normally have me present for... This review involves classified programs beyond your security clearance," Marshall interrupted smoothly. "Your absence is not merely permitted, General. It's required." Thomas straightened, military discipline overriding his discomfort. "Of course, sir. I'll be in my office if you need anything further." As Thomas departed, Marshall turned to his security team leader, a former Delta operator named Vance, who had executed sensitive operations for the Sentinel Group for over a decade. "Status?" Marshall asked quietly. "All entry points secured," Vance replied, his voice equally low. "Second team in position outside the building. Communication scramblers active. Base security has been diverted to a training incident on the eastern perimeter. And the targets, confirmed in the secure briefing facility, 4 identified: Morgan Bishop Carter and Master Sergeant Betson." Marshall's expression hardened. "Carter's involvement is unfortunate. He was a valuable asset." "Containment protocols are prepared for all 4, Vance assured him. Marshall nodded once. "Proceed as planned. Priority 1 is securing all digital evidence. Priority 2 is elimination of witnesses." Vance touched his earpiece, issuing a brief command to the other team members. The elevator doors opened, revealing 2 more contractors who had already secured the area. Marshall entered first, followed by his security team. As the doors closed, each man drew their weapon, suppressed handguns and compact submachine guns designed for close quarters elimination. The hunt for Black Viper had reached its final phase. In the secure briefing facility below, Morgan stood absolutely still, her enhanced senses detecting subtle changes in the environment around them. The slight variation in air pressure as security doors closed throughout the building. The barely perceptible electronic signature of communication scramblers activating. "They're here," she said calmly. "Communications will be compromised in approximately 30 seconds." Carter moved immediately to a secured cabinet, retrieving 4 tactical radios on a dedicated frequency. These operate on an isolated system, short range only, but they should function despite their jammers. He distributed the radios as Morgan continued her assessment. "Initial entry team is moving through the upper level. Standard clearing pattern. I count 8 operators based on movement patterns." Bishop accepted a radio and a sidearm Carter offered from the cabinet. "How do you know that without seeing them?" "Because I can feel them," Morgan replied. Her entire demeanor had transformed the reserve trainee, replaced by a predator alert to every vibration in her environment. Second team is establishing perimeter control outside the building, likely another 8 to 10 operators. Wilson checked the sidearm Carter had given him. Sir, I know we're facing serious allegations against General Marshall, but we're still talking about directly opposing a superior officer with armed force on a U.S. military installation. I understand your concerns, Sergeant, Carter replied grimly, but the evidence is irrefutable. Marshall sacrificed 11 American operators for money and is now attempting to eliminate all witnesses. This goes beyond military justice into the realm of national security and treason. Morgan moved to the tactical display studying the building schematic. They'll cut power to this level before they breach. Standard procedure for hostage rescue operations only. This isn't a rescue, it's an elimination. How long do we have? Bishop asked. Less than 5 minutes, Morgan estimated. They'll secure the upper level, isolate this section, then execute a coordinated breach through all access points simultaneously. Carter activated his radio. All units, this is daylight. Implement Vigilant Shield. I repeat, Vigilant Shield is now active. Acknowledgements came through from multiple positions, Carter's trusted operators moving to counter Marshall's contractors. A dangerous gambit pitting American soldiers against each other in a shadow conflict invisible to official channels. Morgan turned to Bishop. I need you to access the ventilation system between this level and the main floor. There's a maintenance shaft that will put you behind their position. Bishop nodded immediately, grasping her intention. Flanking maneuver. Create confusion in their rear elements while they focus on breaching this position. Exactly, Morgan confirmed. You'll need this. She handed him a small device resembling a remote detonator. Signal disruptor. It will temporarily disable their communications when activated. 5-second delay after pressing the button. Bishop accepted the device, tucking it securely into his tactical vest. What about you? A cold smile briefly touched Morgan's lips. I'm going hunting. She turned to Carter. Colonel, I need access to your weapons locker. Not the standard issue, the specialized equipment. Carter hesitated only briefly before entering a code into a concealed panel on the far wall. A section of the wall slid aside, revealing a cache of weapons not found in standard military inventories. Morgan selected a suppressed Mk-12 special purpose rifle with an advanced thermal scope, checking the weapon with practiced efficiency. Wilson, Morgan said, loading a magazine into the rifle. I need you to create a diversion on the east side of this level. Emergency systems should include smoke generators for fire suppression. Activate them manually to cover the main entrance. Wilson glanced at Carter, who nodded authorization. Yes, ma'am. Wilson replied, the formal address acknowledging the shift in operational authority. As Wilson moved to implement her instructions, Morgan turned back to Bishop. When you reach the upper level, wait for my signal before activating the disruptor. Timing will be critical. What's the signal? Bishop asked. Morgan checked the rifle's scope calibration. You'll know it when you hear it. Carter approached, his expression grave. Alexander, you should know these contractors Marshall brought are former Special Operations. Delta SEAL Team 6, CIA Special Activities Division. They're not conventional opponents. Neither am I, Morgan replied simply. A series of subtle vibrations trembled through the floor security doors on the upper level, closing in sequence. The opening moves of a carefully choreographed assault. They're starting their final approach, Morgan announced. Positions now. Bishop moved quickly to the maintenance access point, disappearing into the narrow shaft that would take him behind enemy lines. Wilson headed toward the environmental controls to prepare the smoke diversion. Carter took up a defensive position, covering the main entrance, radio in one hand and weapon in the other. Morgan moved to the center of the room, closing her eyes briefly. Her breathing slowed to an almost imperceptible rhythm. Her mind cleared of all extraneous thought, focusing entirely on the hunt about to begin. For 3 years, she had carried the weight of her dead teammates. For 3 years, she had pursued the truth while hiding in plain sight. Now, finally, she would bring justice to those who had betrayed the most elite operators America had ever fielded. The lights went out, plunging the facility into darkness, broken only by the soft red glow of emergency lighting. Exactly as Morgan had predicted. Phase 1 of the breach operation. Daylight, this is Phantom, Morgan said into her radio, using her Black Viper call sign for the first time in 3 years. The hunt begins now. General Marshall stood in the Tactical Operations Center on the main floor, surrounded by monitors showing thermal imagery of the secure level below. Vance and his team had executed the preliminary stages with professional precision. Power to the lower level had been cut. Communications were jammed. All access points were covered by assault teams ready to breach on command. Status report, Marshall demanded. All teams in position, Vance confirmed. Thermal imaging shows 4 heat signatures in the main briefing room, consistent with our intelligence on Carter, Morgan, Wilson, and Bishop. Marshall studied the thermal display. Something about the positioning of the heat signatures seemed odd, too static, too evenly distributed, almost as if, check those thermal readings again, Marshall ordered, military intuition triggering alarm bells in his mind. Vance adjusted the sensors, frowning at the results. Sir, the signatures aren't moving naturally. They could be. The realization hit both men simultaneously. Decoys. Heat sources placed to mimic human thermal signatures. It's a trap, Marshall snapped. All teams immediate breach. Repeat, immediate. His order was cut short by a single muffled report from somewhere in the darkness above them. One of the contractors guarding the rear entrance collapsed silently, a precision shot having found the narrow gap between his body armor plates. Sniper, Vance shouted, his training immediately identifying the threat. Upper level northwest corner. The contractors reacted with practiced efficiency, seeking cover and returning fire toward the suspected position. But their target had already moved, ghosting through the darkness with supernatural stealth. Another shot, another contractor down, no muzzle flash, no sound beyond the suppressed report of a precision rifle. The hunters were becoming the hunted. Marshall's mind raced, analyzing the situation with cold calculation. She's in the ventilation system. Seal all access points and deploy thermal grenades. Even as he issued the command, Marshall knew it might be too late. Alexandra Morgan wasn't just an elite sniper. She was Black Viper, trained specifically for exactly this scenario. Close quarters elimination of high-value targets in controlled environments. The most dangerous predator the military had ever created. And she was hunting the man who had betrayed her team. All units converge on the command center, Vance ordered through his tactical communication system. Secure the primary target. No response came through the system, only static. Communications are being jammed, Vance realized. They've turned our own technology against us. Marshall's expression darkened. Implement contingency alpha, full elimination protocol. Vance hesitated, the implications clear. Sir, that would include all personnel in the facility, including base security forces. Implement the protocol, Vance, Marshall repeated coldly. No witnesses, no evidence. That was always the plan. Before Vance could respond, the facility's fire suppression system activated, flooding the command center with thick smoke. Visibility dropped to near zero. The thermal imaging systems became useless, overwhelmed by the changing heat signatures of the environment. Through the smoke, Marshall glimpsed movement, a shadow darker than the surrounding haze. Then came the distinctive sounds of close-quarters combat. Suppressed weapons fire. The impact of combat knives finding their targets. The muffled grunts of trained operators fighting for their lives against an enemy they couldn't see. Secure the primary target, Vance shouted, moving to protect Marshall as the chaos intensified. But Marshall knew better. This wasn't chaos. This was a precisely orchestrated hunt. The smoke, the communications disruption, the strategic elimination of key personnel, all designed to isolate him from his protection detail, all designed to leave him face to face with the last Black Viper. The smoke parted momentarily, revealing a slender figure standing 10 feet away. Alexandra Morgan, rifle held casually at her side, regarding him with the cold detachment of a predator assessing prey. Hello, General, she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the commotion surrounding them. It's been 3 years. Did you miss me? Marshall maintained his composure even as he calculated possible escape routes. Operative 12, I should have confirmed your elimination personally in Mosul. Yes, you should have, Morgan agreed, taking a step closer. That was your first mistake. Your second was believing I wouldn't find the truth about Blackstone. And what truth do you think you've found? Marshall asked, playing for time as Vance moved into position behind Morgan. $20 million, Morgan replied calmly. Transferred to your accounts 3 weeks before you sent 12 American operators into a trap. Blood money from enemies of the United States. Marshall's expression remained impassive. You've spent 3 years chasing Ghost Operative 12, constructing conspiracies to explain a simple mission failure. The mission didn't fail, General, Morgan countered. It succeeded exactly as you planned it. 11 operators eliminated. The 12th hunted until she could be silenced. All evidence of the Sentinel Group's activities erased. Marshall's eyes narrowed at the mention of the group. You have no idea what you're talking about. I have proof, Morgan stated flatly. Every communication, every transfer, every order you issued to ensure Black Viper would be eliminated in Mosul. And now it's being transmitted to multiple secure locations across the country, including the offices of the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Marshall's face. Behind Morgan, Vance raised his weapon, preparing to eliminate the threat to his commander. Without looking back, Morgan spoke calmly. Bishop now. From somewhere in the smoke-filled environment came the distinctive click of a device activating. Vance's communication system erupted in a squeal of electronic interference, momentarily disorienting him. In that split second, Morgan moved. Her pivot was blindingly fast, the rifle swinging up and around in a practiced arc. 2 suppressed shots in rapid succession. Vance collapsed his weapon, unfired precision rounds, having found the vulnerable points in his protective gear. Marshall lunged for the sidearm holstered at his hip, but Morgan was faster. The rifle barrel pressed against his chest before his hand reached the weapon. That won't help you, General, Morgan said quietly. Nothing will. Marshall's eyes hardened with cold defiance. If you shoot me, you'll never leave this base alive. My death will trigger protocols beyond anything you can imagine. I'm not going to shoot you, General, Morgan replied, something dangerous glinting in her eyes. That would be too quick, too merciful. She pressed a small device into Marshall's hand, a secure communicator displaying video footage from Operation Blackstone. The final moments of 11 elite operators as they were systematically eliminated in Mosul. Their deaths captured by helmet cameras, their final words preserved in digital clarity. You're going to live, General, Morgan continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Live to face a military tribunal for treason. Live to hear the testimony of everyone involved in the Sentinel Group. Live to watch as everything you built crumbles around you. Marshall stared at the footage, at his composed facade finally cracking. You don't understand what you're doing. The Sentinel Group exists because it must. Because nations cannot survive on ideals alone. Someone must make the difficult choices. Save it for your trial, Morgan replied coldly. The evidence is already secured, the transmission complete, your contractors neutralized. As if to confirm her words, Colonel Carter's voice came through her radio. Phantom, this is daylight. All hostile forces contained. Military police units loyal to base command are securing the facility. Morgan never took her eyes off Marshall. You betrayed everything the uniform stands for, General. You betrayed your oath. You betrayed your country. Her voice hardened. And you betrayed my team, my family. Behind them, the smoke began to clear as the suppression system cycled down. Bishop emerged from a side corridor, his weapon trained on Marshall. Carter and Wilson appeared from the main entrance, accompanied by military police officers. General Lawrence Marshall, Carter announced formally, you are hereby detained under Article 94 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice for charges of treason, conspiracy, and the murder of United States military personnel. As the MPs moved to take Marshall into custody, he fixed one final glare on Morgan. This isn't over, Operative 12. The Sentinel Group extends beyond me, beyond the military, beyond America's borders. I know, Morgan replied with cold certainty, and I'll find every last one of them. The promise hung in the air between them, not a threat, but a simple statement of fact. The last Black Viper would continue her hunt, until all those responsible for betraying her team faced justice, no matter how long it took, no matter how high the pursuit led. 3 weeks later, Alexandra Morgan stood alone before the black granite memorial at Arlington National Cemetery. The morning sun cast long shadows across the hallowed ground where America's fallen warriors found their final rest. The spring air carried the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming cherry blossoms, nature's perpetual reminder that life continues even in places dedicated to honoring the dead. Morgan wore civilian clothes, simple practical attire that allowed her to blend into the background of tourists and mourners visiting the nation's most sacred military shrine. To casual observers, she was just another visitor paying respects. Another face in the constant stream of Americans honoring sacrifices made in their name. Only her eyes betrayed her true nature, watchful, alert, constantly scanning her surroundings and with the ingrained habits of someone who had spent years as both hunter and hunted. She moved with quiet purpose to a newly installed section of the memorial. 11 names freshly engraved in the polished stone. Names that had been absent for 3 years while their sacrifices remained classified, their heroism unacknowledged. The members of Black Viper finally receiving the recognition they had earned with their lives. Morgan traced her fingers gently across each name, memories of her teammates flowing through her mind. Not as they had died in Mosul, but as they had lived. Their laughter during training, their fierce concentration during operations, their unwavering loyalty to each other and their country. "I kept my promise," she whispered to the stone. "The truth is known. Your sacrifice is honored. Your betrayer facing justice." General Marshall's arrest had sent shockwaves through the military and intelligence communities. The evidence Morgan had gathered proved irrefutable: financial transactions, communications, operational orders that clearly demonstrated treason at the highest levels. The subsequent investigation had already identified 3 additional members of the Sentinel Group within the Pentagon, with more suspected throughout the government and allied nations. "They asked me to rejoin," Morgan continued her quiet conversation with the memorial. "A new unit, new mission parameters, hunting the remaining members of the Sentinel Group across the globe." She fell silent, remembering her meeting with senior intelligence officials. Their offer had been compelling resources, authority, and the chance to complete her mission of bringing all those responsible for Blackstone to justice. A purpose aligned perfectly with her skills and her need for closure. "I said yes," she told the stone. "The hunt continues for all of you." Movement in her peripheral vision alerted her to an approaching figure. Morgan didn't turn, having already identified the familiar gait and posture of Staff Sergeant Bishop. He stopped a respectful distance away and allowing her private moment with the memorial. When she finally acknowledged his presence with a slight nod, he moved forward to stand beside her. "The ceremony is scheduled for next month," Bishop said quietly, referring to the official memorial service for the newly recognized Black Viper operators. "Full military honors. The president will attend." Morgan nodded. "They deserved this 3 years ago." "Yes, they did," Bishop agreed simply. They stood in companionable silence, united by the experiences they had shared at Fort Benning. Bishop had emerged from those events with a new assignment, part of the Joint Task Force, investigating the Sentinel Group's infiltration of military command structures. His expertise and proven loyalty making him an ideal candidate for such sensitive work. "Colonel Carter asked me to give you this," Bishop finally said, handing her a small case. Morgan opened it to reveal a set of specialized dog tags. Different from standard military issue, these bore no name or service number. Only a small insignia, a black serpent coiled around a bullet, and the designation, Operative 12. "The new unit becomes operational next week," Bishop explained. "Carter will command overall strategy. You'll lead the field operations." Morgan closed the case, tucking it into her pocket. "And you—" A ghost of a smile touched Bishop's lips. "Someone has to keep you from disappearing into the shadows completely. I'm your designated liaison to conventional forces." The arrangement made sense. Bishop had proven himself trustworthy under the most extreme circumstances. He understood the nature of her mission and the methods she would employ to accomplish it. Most importantly, he had seen her as she truly was, not merely a weapon or an operative, but a soldier dedicated to justice for her fallen comrades. "There's something else," Bishop added, his expression growing more serious. "Intelligence intercepted communications suggesting Marshall wasn't the highest-ranking member of the Sentinel Group. Someone with even greater authority and influence may have been directing his actions." Morgan's eyes hardened slightly, the predator within stirring at the scent of new prey. "Do we have a name?" "Not yet," Bishop admitted, "but we have a trail to follow." Morgan turned from the memorial, her private moment of remembrance complete. The hunt awaited not for vengeance, though that motivation remained, but for justice, for accountability. For the truth that all who serve deserve from those who command them. Then let's get started, she said, walking away from the memorial with Bishop at her side. The Black Viper hunts again. Behind them, the morning sun illuminated the 11 names carved in black granite, a permanent reminder of sacrifice and betrayal of justice delayed but finally delivered. And of the 12th operator who had survived to ensure their story would be told. The last Black Viper, the shadow that refused to disappear, the hunter that would not rest until all those responsible faced the consequences of their actions. The legacy continued.